Good evening all and welcome to tonight's meeting of the Eastleigh Local Area Committee. Councillors are reminded that to take part in this meeting you must have an open mind so that you can make all the relevant considerations presented to the meeting into account in reaching your decision. By attending today you've decided that you will listen to all points of view expressed by the speakers and public and are able to participate and cannot be seen to have predetermined the application. This meeting will be video recorded and will be uploaded to the Council's website. If many members of the public prefer not to be recorded, then please do contact a member of staff. If you're planning on filming or recording the meeting, then please do let us know so that we can ensure that you're not filming members of the public that do not wish to be filmed. The Chair reserves the right to ask any filming considered intrusive to be stopped. More information is available on the Council's website. We always welcome people to speak at the meeting, although this is a formal committee meeting of Eastleigh Borough Council and not a public meeting. Members of the public that have registered to speak will be invited to speak at the relevant agenda item and will be given a total of 3 minutes to speak. When the light is amber, then we believe it's 30 seconds or a minute remaining, but we'll let you know in a second. People wishing to speak on an item on the agenda are able to do so before the debate starts. Once the debate has started, however, it's not possible to invite or receive comments from the floor. We want to be as inclusive as possible, but will not tolerate any disruptions to our meeting. Should there be any disruption, we do have the power under the Council's constitution to remove people from the meeting or continue in private, neither of which we take lightly or wish to do so. So, on to item 1, apologies. Nikki, do we have any apologies, please?
We have apologies from Councillors Mann, Dedier and Bicknell.
Thank you, Nikki. Declarations of interest. Do any members have any declarations of interest they wish to make? If so, please indicate now. And when called, please state the nature and reason for the interest. You can, of course, declare any interest as they occur to you in the meeting. Item 3, we move on to the minutes of the last meeting held on the 3rd of September 2024. I'd like to approve these as a true record. Could I please have a proposer? Cllr Park and a seconder? Cllr Irish. Any comments on the minutes? All those in favour? Thank you, councillors. We now move on to public participation and we have Mr. Simon Payne registered to speak. I believe we've got a different microphone now where you have to press the talk button. So if you could press the talk button, 3 minutes starts.
Okay. Chair, councillors, on the 26th September 2023 at your local area committee, you had an air quality update. You used to have them every 6 months, but I haven't seen one since then. So just wondering, what is actually happening about air quality in the borough? Again, I can see there's an annual report on the website, again, on about potentially removing the air quality zones. Well, actually, shouldn't this be debated and actually, been actually brought out in public instead of just being just in a report hidden away on your website? And then secondly, it's my annual visit to you around leaves. Again, on the website, you put now how often you mow grass areas. Could you do one similar to that to show how often you actually go and sweep the roads? Because actually there's a considerable build-up in many roads in Eastleigh, and actually now if it doesn't get swept soon, we're going to have drainage issues, and then it will become a Hampshire problem. But actually it could be fixed before it happens. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. So air quality updates now go to policy and performance because the air quality is not just an ELAC issue, it is a wider borough issue. So it's the resources have been pulled to you to present a report for the whole of the borough. So that then gets scrutinised by policy and performance and goes to cabinet. So you'll be able to go to policy and performance and ask your questions, etc. With regards to leaves, I will give you a follow-up on that. I do think off the top of my head we get paid to do it a number of times. In the past we've done extra ones at our cost, but the roads aren't our responsibility, they're the responsibility of Hampshire County Council. We can't afford to always backfill their services, but I will find out some more specific details and do understand the problems that it causes. Thank you. So we now move on to the Chair's report. So I'd like to start off with a big thank you to the AWCA for a wonderful community meal that was held in the precinct last Thursday during half term. It was great to see so many people in attendance and the food was amazing. We're also off to a good start with our Together We Make Eastleigh project. The first step is to find out what people think about Eastleigh now and how to improve it for the future. Hemingway Design are now processing the 2,442 completed surveys. This is a record for any questionnaire for the town in recent years. We hope to have the survey report and summary of the key findings early next week. This will inform the emerging ideas on how to improve the town. So watch this space. But I know that there were meetings with local businesses and certainly I attended one with local councillors and Hemingway were really listening and engaging and have got some great ideas. I reported back in July on the launch of our newly refurbished tennis courts at the Hub Leisure Centre. Since then, I'm pleased to say that we are now already getting over 40 bookings per month. If anyone would like to play and play, or join one of the coaching sessions, you can book them via the National Tennis Association website. Our tree planting programme continues, and this season we've agreed sites for over 170 larger trees in the local area and a few hundred whips. The Beryl Bike Hire scheme has got off to a great start since August this year, and as of mid-October we've seen 873 journeys, nearly 2,000 kilometres ridden, 227 hours of exercise generated with an average journey distance of 2.18 kilometres, an average journey time of 16 minutes. We should have an announcement on further bike hubs being installed at the Eastleigh Railway Station and Airport Parkway very soon. And finally, a reminder of our upcoming events for the remainder of 2024. Remembrance Day Parade and ceremony on the Sunday, the 10th of November. Our Christmas light switch on and fun day on the Saturday, 16th of November, followed by Christmas markets on the 7th and 21st of December. We now move on to the presentation of planning guidelines. So I'd like to invite Gary to give the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Excuse me, good evening, members. Just quick guidelines or presentation, as always, before every committee, to give you a reminder as to what you need to take into account when considering this evening's applications. So proposals must be considered on planning grounds and they must be determined in line with the development plan unless there are material considerations which indicate otherwise. The development plan is the adopted Eastleigh Borough Local Plan 2016 to 2036 together with the Hampshire Minerals and Waste Plan, which won't be relevant to either of the applications this evening. Relevant considerations, as well as the plan, are any adopted supplementary planning documents relating to matters such as quality places, residential parking standards, planning obligation, trees, etc., or any relevant government policy, including the National Policy Framework and its presumption in favour of sustainable development. The MPPF is a material consideration of significant weight and takes precedent over the local plan where there are any policies which don't accord with the MPPF. But given our plan is relatively new in planning terms, it is in full accordance with the MPPF requirements. The MPPF it was amended in the end of 2023, although it's looking like it will be updated again with the new government, although a date for that isn't known as yet. But essentially it requires development or sustainable development to be required or delivered without delay, needs to meet housing needs and housing delivery, promotes the growth of the economy, requires a high standard of design, and ensures that any new development, any impact is prevented or adverse impact is prevented or mitigated. And it has a presumption in favour of sustainable development, which is covered in three threads: economic, social and environmental. And in order for a development to be considered sustainable in terms of the MPPF, it must meet all three of those requirements. They are interdependent, so all three must be met in order for proposals to meet the standards. Other material considerations may well be planning history or previous applications or decisions related to that site, any appeal decisions or site-specific policies, any site-specific matters, highways, parking, amenity, whatever may be relevant to the particular circumstances of that application. Any consultee and third-party comments, or any precedent, i.e. case law, which establishes how decisions should be made. Non-planning related issues are any moral, racial or religious views, the devaluation or otherwise of property, loss of any private view or breach of covenants, or matters covered by other legislation such as building regulations, etc. Any personal views about the character of the applicant or their reasons for submitting an application, or any civil matters such as boundary disputes. So in terms of decisions this evening, obviously as officers we have put forward a recommendation. You don't have to go with that recommendation if you choose not to. However, if you choose to put forward an alternative decision on the application, you have to give reasons why, and it must be explained why you've decided to go that route, whether that be to approve or refuse an application. You also have the option to defer an application to seek additional information or amendments, but again you need to indicate clearly what these are so that officers can take those forward with the applicant. And you also have the option to amend any of the recommended conditions or apply additional controls or details being required as part of any application, although these must be reasonable in terms of planning policy and so on. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So it's great that we've got people registered to speak on these, and we've got some statements. So I think Guy's going to read out 3 statements first. I'm getting ahead of myself, sorry, because I've read these papers so many times, it's all in my... So yeah, sorry, we need to see the presentation of the application. Apologies.
Thank you, Chair. We'll ignore that one. Right, first application this evening, planning application at 33 George Street in Eastleigh for the proposed change of use of the dwelling, use class C3, to a 7-bedroom or 7-person house of multiple occupation, or HMO, which in planning terms is a sui generis use. The site's not very far away from there. Just over there, we probably could throw a stone towards it. Part of Newtown area, so the sort of Edwardian, gridiron, terraced area of Eastleigh. And as you can see here from the top photos there, number 33, let me just get my little pointer up, is the house there in the middle, with the van parked in front of it, and the green frontage there. As you can see, it's a mid-terrace property in a typical terraced street, which you find in this part of Eastleigh. The top photo here shows the rear access to the properties and that run of terraces. Whilst reasonably wide, it's not wide enough for vehicles, so essentially it's pedestrian and cycle access only. The 3 photos along the bottom show the rear of the property. As you can see here, there's a garden area, existing shed. There's a single-storey rear extension which was existing prior to, well, it's been up a number of years, built by the previous owners, but more recently is this dormer, box dormer that's been added to the roof of the property. Now, both those elements are permitted development. They don't require planning approval. So whilst I'll be showing you some drawings of these just for clarity, the physical changes to the building itself don't require consent, so they're not what you are considering. So just for clarity, site, say mid-terrace property, small garden to the front, modest rear garden as per its neighbours, existing shed which would be used for bike storage, and then bin storage could go to the rear there as well. In terms of the floor plans, the proposals are that there would be 2 bedrooms at ground floor level with a shared bathroom. To the rear of the house, and including that existing small single-storey extension, would form a larger communal kitchen area and living area. First floor, there'd be 3 bedrooms, 2 at the front here which share a bathroom, 1 at the rear with an ensuite. And then up within the loft space, it would be 2 further bedrooms, both with ensuites. In terms of elevations, from the front, no change. The only noticeable change are the 2 roof light windows, but those, I say, already in and they're permitted development. They don't require consent. Neither does the dormer window or the rear extension, but that has been up a number of years anyway. In terms of updates then, since the report was published, there haven't been any. No further representations, no further consultee comments. So then in terms of considerations, just more of a reminder, as you've all gone through the reports anyway, we are within the urban edge where the basic principle of development is acceptable. We're very close to Eastleigh Town Centre, so it's a very sustainable location. As you'll have seen in the report, conversion to a 6-person HMO has already been granted. There is a permitted change of use from an ordinary dwelling, which in plain terms is use class C3, to a use class C4, which is a 6-person HMO. That doesn't require any formal planning approval from the local planning authority. That is permitted development, as is, as I say, the physical alterations to the dwelling. So that you must bear in mind. There have been various objections received. Principal concerns relate to parking, character of the area, and noise and disturbance from the dwelling being converted to an HMO and the increased occupation that may bring with it. In terms of formal consultations, though, we've had no objection from Housing Standards, who have confirmed that the dwelling and the room sizes all meet their minimum size requirements, as does the rear garden, and there's been no objection from Hampshire Highways, who've cited that it's a very sustainable location where they feel that it could actually be a zero parking scheme. Although actually in reality the property has 2 parking permits that would remain with the property. Actually on the parking issue, because the issuing of new permits, there was a policy when Eastleigh was in charge of parking that no additional permits would be issued. However, as you're aware, Hampshire, as the local highway authority, are now in control of the parking requirements. I can't say for certain whether they have continued that policy or not, but ultimately it's up to them whether any new permits would be issued or not. But there are 2 currently with the property. But as I say, bear in mind, it is a very sustainable location. So in terms of concluding then, the main consideration is, given that the house can be converted to a 6-person HMO without requiring consent, is the difference of that 1 extra occupant. That 1 extra occupant means that it falls outside of permitted development, hence the reason for the planning application, and that's why we're here this evening. In planning terms, if it needs to be demonstrated, how do we measure the difference between with 1 extra occupier versus what can be done without requiring planning consent? And that's essentially what we need to assess. In reality, this is very difficult to demonstrate or substantiate or provide any evidence towards. It's not to say that there won't be an impact, but it's very difficult to measure that, and even if we could, in reality, would that impact be to such an extent as to make it an unacceptable scheme? If 6 persons are considered acceptable, i.e. permitted development, how does 1 additional resident, the difference of 1 additional resident, impact the wider area? If it was 3 or 4 additional residents, then it's easier to possibly put an argument forward, but 1 additional resident, it's very difficult to do so. So we've always got to bear in mind that fallback position of the 6-person HMO. So in officers' views, having dealt with a number of these applications and fully taken on board all the concerns that have been raised, in planning terms it's very difficult to demonstrate that, and in planning terms if you can't demonstrate it, it's very difficult to justify a refusal. So if you can't justify a refusal, you can't demonstrate the harm or unacceptable harm, therefore you are, in planning terms, have essentially no other option but to recommend an approval. As I said earlier, you of course don't have to take that viewpoint on board. If you choose not to, then I can obviously advise on what may, or what, if you have any ideas as to what you may want to refuse the scheme on, I can advise as to how well that might stand should the applicant wish to appeal a refusal, but ultimately the decision is yours as the local authority in this case. Right, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Gary. So back to where I skipped to. We've got some statements that are going to be read out.
Thank you, Chair. I've got three statements. The first is from Melanie Grace, a resident. Many of the objections in relation to the HMO and proposed extra bedroom relate to parking. We were told that parking permits would not be granted. The property is being marketed with parking. Please can you comment on the situation regarding parking permits and, if granted, where the council expects 6 to 7 extra vehicles to park in an already congested area. The next, on a similar vein, is from Kevin Berman. As you may be aware, the availability of on-street parking in George Street is currently very poor. As George Street is terraced, there is no off-street parking option for most residents. How will the availability of parking permits be limited to this converted property to ensure the on-street parking in George Street is not overloaded by the 6 to 7 additional residents? Just assuming most new residents will not require a permit based on statistics is not sufficient. And finally, this is from Debbie Tan. I am part of the committee that runs the Newtown Residents Association, and a growing number of residents are contacting me to express their concerns about HMOs in the Newtown area. The latest planning application in George Street will turn a small family home into a 7-bedroom house. This is the latest in a growing number of HMOs in the area. Whilst we are a friendly and welcoming community, we have nothing against new people moving into our area. There are concerns being raised about the impact on parking, litter and bins, safety. One HMO was recently subject to a devastating fire, and a general erosion of the family-friendly character of the area. On behalf of the residents, please would the local area committee meeting consider bringing in a bedroom restriction so that any HMO needs to be in keeping with the property size. For example, small houses in George Street really should not have more than 4 to 5 separate rooms for let, not 7. Consider an overall restriction on the total number of HMOs as the proportion of the area in order not to further erode its character. Consider what the plan is for parking in an already crowded area, and consider rejecting the application as having 7 rooms for let in a small property such as this is just too many. Please note, I would add that I'm writing on behalf of the residents who have contacted me via the Residents Association, and this is not a personal objection from me. Thank you. That's Debbie Tan.
Thank you, Guy. I would now like to ask Lynn Rouse to come and speak to us. And if you remember to press the talk button, thank you.
Good evening. You've covered on some of the things on the parking. It is, I mean, I take my car out in the evening, I can't get back in. I have to park right down by Eastleigh Health Centre and then have to walk all the way home. I'm in my 70s and it's just ridiculous. So if we've got another 7 parking spaces in, well, it's just silly. And also I did speak to Hampshire and they said there is a maximum of 2 and they are not going to go more than 2 on 33. My other second point is a generic one really, again about HMOs. The house next to me has just been sold and I've been told this week that that's going to be an HMO. How many are there going to be in the Newtown area? I can name about 8 at the moment. It's ridiculous. You know, 6 or 7 people in every house, adults. Where are they going? What are they doing? And we also had one earlier a few years ago, and we had the police there every other week. There was fires there, and there was a fire in one in the Crescent the other day, as it's already been mentioned. Luckily, it was during the day. What happens at night? Is there fire precautions put in place in these HMOs or not? Again, I was in the house fire, well, next door to me, caught fire when I was younger, and I got a fear of fire completely, and it worries me sick. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can you advise us on the fire precautions that are for HMOs?
I can't advise officially because it's not a planning issue, it's not my remit, but I have spoken to my housing colleagues, and my understanding is that any HMOs with 5 or more residents are required to have a licence. And in order to get that licence, you have to meet certain standards in terms of fire regulations, fire escape, alarms, etc., etc. But 4 people or less, then those requirements don't come into effect because there's no need for a licence. And I think you're right in terms of the number of HMOs. I did look, the list of currently licensed HMOs is available online on the website, and I think I counted 9 within the Newtown area. Yeah, there's 9, yeah.
Thank you. Now I'd like to ask James Barrett to come and speak. Thank you.
Good evening. You may know I am actually live at number 35 George Street, so this is directly impacting myself and my family. I'll be upfront and honest, we are in the process of moving house, but the HMO has not got a bearing on that. Our objection existed before then. I noticed on your NPPF chart I thought you showed earlier, Gary, that there were several considerations to take into place. Economic, I forget the other two, I apologise. But first off, let's deal with the economic. What benefit economically is the addition of another bedroom going to add to our local community? Most of these people are transient. They don't add significant value to the community as a whole, especially Newtown, which is predominantly, thankfully at the moment, still a family area. However, the term permitted development, I think, would rankle with every single resident that any of these houses that are ideal for first-time buyers, young families to get on the housing ladder, which is in extremely short supply within Eastleigh, within the whole borough, as well as the town itself, affordable housing. These houses are being taken up by developers, and I have nothing against them. It's not an ideological objection that I have. It is purely and simply one of community, one of economics. What are they bringing to the table? Very little. What are they bringing to the community? Very little. What are they bringing to the area as a whole from their engagement? Very little. When we talk about parking, absolutely, parking is the biggest issue in the whole of Newtown. I'm parked at the moment by the health centre because I was running late because of the traffic. I can pretty much guarantee you when I leave here, I'm going to be going back to park there because there will be nowhere on George Street, there will be nowhere on the Crescent. My understanding currently of the permit, the way it stands, is you have to have proof of residence. Therefore, how can 2 permits be issued when no one has actually been able to provide proof of residence? It cannot and must not sit with the developer. That has to be an individual decision based on based through Hampshire County Council. And again, the transient nature. How often are we going to be applying for permits? How are they going to keep track of who does and who doesn't? And also, each permit comes with 50 visitor permits. Are they going to be restricted? Or are these 2 permits going to in effect allow another 100 working days of parking within the area? Again, I ask you to consider all the factors and then reject this application. And again, just to reiterate, not for ideological grounds, but purely and simply based on the impact that it will have on the residents of Eastleigh. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I'd like to invite Mr. William Burrows to speak. Thank you.
Yeah, hello everybody, I'm Will Burrows, the landlord of 33 George Street. I just wanted to introduce myself and address some of the key concerns that people have brought forward through the planning proposal. So I'm a family man, I live in Winchester. I've also got a landscape gardening business that I've been running for the last 10 years. And our mission with Sage Living Spaces property is to significantly improve the rental accommodation in the local area. We do this through our back to brick refurbs, where we bring what's a Victorian terrace property back up to modern day standards whilst being sympathetic to the fact it's a railway town. We fully insulate throughout the whole property and we replumb and rewire to make sure we're adding the best possible materials. We then use our interior design to really bring this property to life and create lovely homes for people. I'd also like to highlight the fact that we're already using this as a 6-bed HMO, and the argument is just over the 7th bedroom. So we've designed this with this in mind. It's a spacious HMO, and in terms of the bedroom standards and the living spaces, we are far higher than any other properties in the area, and in terms of the Eastleigh Borough Council standards, we're already way above that. So the main objections coming forward are the fact that there's parking issues. We've now got 4 tenants onboarded, and out of all of them, only one of them have a car. This was part of our evaluation of Eastleigh. It's so close to the station and it's very close to the bus station that many young people don't have cars these days. So we only have 2 parking spaces available. Beyond that, there won't be 7 people parking on the streets. This is further supported by Hampshire Highways that also don't have any objection, and we've got ample bike storage for 7 bikes. We're also providing bikes for any tenants that don't have cars, because we want them to make the most of the new cycle lanes that have been improved through Eastleigh all the way out to Southampton. We see that street parking is regularly marshalled by the parking wardens. That's why we wouldn't use any more than 2 spaces that we've already been allocated. And more often than not, we might not need to use them at all. If people don't have cars, then we won't be using the housing. There's also a perception that HMOs tend to lead to antisocial behaviour and downgrade the community, and I want to take you back to the fact that this is a very carefully considered property where we're using highly designed properties to create a very high-end product that naturally attracts a very higher-end tenant that will add to the community, not detract from it. We've also got a very thorough screening process and onboarding process. We make sure that this is the case. We feel that we're adding significant investment into the area, providing jobs not only for the tradespeople that did the work, but ongoing support for cleaners and the trades that are coming in, gardeners, to make sure that we keep this a high-end product. So whilst I appreciate the concerns highlighted by some of the residents, we feel that having 1 additional bedroom will have no adverse effect on any of the community, and that from a planning point of view, there should be no reason to refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll now open it up to councillors for questions. Councillor Park.
Thank you. Question for Gary. Over and above, parking is obviously going to be something that's talked about a lot, and we'll probably talk about that in debate, but a question for you. Can we add to the conditions an amendment to say that these rooms can't be advertised as having parking? I understand they have parking, there's 2 allowed, but can they not be advertised? Can that be a condition, that any rooms are not advertised as having parking? Because that way you won't be attracting people who think, oh, I can just come here and then use the visitors' parking or park around the corner. That stumped you?
Could we apply such a thing? Would it be acceptable in planning terms? We probably couldn't, because there is parking. There are 2 permits available to the property.
Mm-hmm.
That is obviously, and if Hampshire have already confirmed that they won't issue any further permits to that property, so that property will always have 2 permits. That's really a matter for the landlord and how he chooses to manage it. And if the permit has to be a named permit, not just to that property, he's going to have 2 tenants in there at any one time.
Yes.
That will have a permit. If there are any further tenants and there isn't a permit available, then obviously that's the case. If somebody moves out, they would hand their permit back. It's available for somebody else to use. But I don't think we couldn't put a condition that says they cannot be advertised with parking, because that would mean that essentially any future tenants who might be able to utilise a permit wouldn't be able to have the permit.
Well, no, I'm not saying they can't use it, just that when the advert is being displayed, it doesn't say this has parking.
Yeah,
it's not saying you can't say it doesn't have parking, but you could just omit that detail from the adverts. And I kind of thought that was going to be your answer, but I was just looking at whether there's that nuance that you could...
I think we would be on shaky ground or dodgy ground if we were to look at that as a planning condition.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor.
At the moment, you say that there's 2 parking permits allowed. Is it possible that Hampshire County Council might quash that? Because as I understand, I've read somewhere that although it's been renovated and extended, it's that's permitted development anyway. I'm thinking it comes under new development, and that new development does not give parking permits, so why are two allocated? Does that make sense?
Yes. It does make sense. I know what you're getting at. The Eastleigh policy, which looks like Hampshire have continued, the Eastleigh policy that Hampshire have continued was always no new permits would be issued for new development, i.e. and new, we meant additional dwelling units. And that was at a time when a lot of the terrace houses within Eastleigh were being converted into flats. So one dwelling, in planning terms, it's a dwelling unit, a dwelling house. It doesn't matter how many bedrooms. It can have one bedroom, it can have 100 bedrooms. In planning terms, it's one dwelling. So in that case, if you converted a dwelling to one or two flats, you're increasing the number of dwellings overall, and that's when no new permits would be issued. There was a bit of a debate as to whether the permits that originally went with the house are transferred to one of the flats or split between them. But I think it's more to do with the sort of a change in the address. Would you change the address from 12 to 12A and 12B or so on? But in this case, an HMO is still, for planning purposes, a single dwelling. There is no new development, it's not increasing the number of households. There are more residents, but not the number of households in planning terms. So I don't think that, but ultimately it's up to Hampshire on how they wish to apply that policy. But in the past, even when Eastleigh undertook the management of the resident schemes, an HMO scheme wouldn't have the permits removed because it's still a single dwelling. It's not increasing the number of dwellings overall.
Yeah, I just read somewhere about new developments, and I thought this came under new development because of all that's being done to it.
No, it's not new development or increased development. It's just changing the use. It's purely a use class issue within, but it's still one property.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Spencer.
I was wondering about the bins. So ultimately, in planning terms, we're deciding whether we're willing to upgrade this from 6 to 7. 6 people's bins is already quite a lot on a residential street, with alleyway down the back, which clearly is big enough to get bin vans down. What's the bin situation at the minute with 6 dwellings? How many individual bins is that? If it went to 7, would that perhaps require a large commercial bin? Something along those lines?
It's too late now.
Hopefully you can hear me.
In terms of the bins, it wouldn't be one of the large Euro bins that they're called, the big ones. They're normally for flatted schemes, and it's normally 6 flats or more that you tend to have those larger communal bins. It would still be the usual wheelie bins. It may be there just might be 2 waste and 2 recycle bins rather than 1. There is a condition that says that they've got to be stored to the rear, although, which seemed to be the case. It looks like most people keep them to the rear. There was very few that I saw, actually people kept them in the front garden area. But yes, if there's a need for addition, just as if you had a large family with a large household, you can request another bin to be issued to you, and that's a requirement that we'd have to do as the local authority. That's part of our remit, which we would have to undertake.
Okay, I've got some questions. Looking at the application and looking through the evidence documents, the parking evidence was all from midweek. Do we have any parking evidence from the weekends? Because summer evenings, you're not always going to have people in, but weekends is when people's family come to visit, and it's much harder to park on a weekend or on a dark, autumn, winter evening than a summer evening that I've seen the evidence for.
I believe yes, there was a brief parking survey put in support of the application. I believe there was a Sunday in there at least, I think, from memory. I'll have to look through it again, but essentially it was a mix of days, a mix of times, not just within the restricted hours, but also outside the restricted hours, at times when you expect most people are likely to be back from work. It showed there were some spaces around, but ultimately, again, there's only 2 permits available, and from a planning point of view, it's a highly sustainable location. Could we look at refusing the scheme on parking grounds? I think it could be very tricky to do that. And I think that the evidence that has been provided is not unreasonable. It's not a full-on, there's a method called the Lambeth method, which is a recognised method for parking surveys, but that's actually quite in-depth and quite a lot of work to do. But the survey that was provided, whilst not following that Lambeth method entirely, I thought it was a reasonable indication of what the situation is like. But of course, as I put in a report, they are just snapshots in time. So you've just got to make a general assumption.
And the other concern is seeing the advert for the property on openrent.co.uk. It says it comes with parking. Now, if one permit's already gone and there's possibly and 4 units have gone, so that's another 3 units, all advertised with parking. How are we going to decide that, all 3 people aren't going to get a parking space when they apply for the advert and say, oh, look, parking?
I'd say that's up to the landlord on how he chooses to manage that. If there are permits available and free, then yes, you could advertise that. If there aren't, then at the moment, there may well be one free. And as he's already said, a number of his tenants don't have a car or don't need a car because it's a very sustainable location. Owning a car is expensive business these days, certainly if you're a younger or newer driver. But say that's for him to manage. We can't control that. But if it turns out that there are no, ultimately a tenant will be made aware if there is a permit available for them or not, and they will choose to either take on the tenancy or look elsewhere.
Councillr Irish.
Thank you, Chair. How do we deal with the Sunday and bank holiday situation when there's no parking enforcement, but people will come and visit and park there? And there's also a problem on a Sunday now. I get lots of complaints from residents about they can't even park on a Sunday because people are going to various things in Eastleigh and all sorts of things like that. So if you've got a situation on a Sunday or a bank holiday where there's no permit needed so you can park there, if they've got visitors or they've got a car and they want to park, it's going to increase the problem. So how do we deal with the Sunday and bank holiday situation?
Essentially, there is acknowledged issues in the area. You're all aware of that. It's probably one of the biggest things in your inbox is parking complaints, no matter where you are in the borough, not just Eastleigh. But ultimately, what you need to look at is this proposal, this application. Will this application cause such an issue with the existing parking situation? Will it make it so much worse as to make it unacceptable? This application can't be penalised for other people abusing the lack of restrictions at weekends. People may be coming into Eastleigh Town Centre to do a bit of shopping or pop into the cinema but not wanting to pay the car parking charges and so on. With that is an existing problem that's already there. Approving or refusing this application won't really make any difference to that. The way to address that is to extend the parking restrictions, not to penalise. So ultimately, whilst it's an acknowledged issue, what you need to focus on is this application. Will this application add so much to those existing issues that we could justify in planning terms refusing it?
Looking at the character of Newtown, what are the original number of bedrooms for that type of property? Are they 3-bedroom properties? So the neighbours will be 3-bedroom properties?
Unless they extend or just a loft conversion.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. So 6-person HMO is permitted development. Is this a national government policy or is this EBC policy? National policy. So as much as we might hate 6-person HMOs, there's absolutely nothing we can do about that.
There's nothing you can do about it at this point in time. You can, in planning terms, apply what's called an Article 4 direction, and that allows local planning authorities to essentially do a blanket removal of permitted development rights for particular types of development. I know it's been done in Southampton, I know it's been done in Portsmouth, because there have been big problems with HMOs, mainly related to students in those areas, where there has been a huge change in the makeup of local areas like the Polygon and so on in Southampton, which is entirely student pretty much now. But in order to apply such there's a lot of work involved in that, there's a lot of research needs to go into that, there's a lot of consultation, public consultations and so on that need to be undertaken. If it's something that members are minded to do, then it's obviously something that can be looked into, and I know my planning policy colleagues are looking at it at the moment. But in reality, as we said, registered HMOs in Newtown area are 9 at the moment, which doesn't include this application yet, or this property yet, so we're looking at 10. How many properties overall are there in Newtown? I don't know.
Oh, that's a good question. What's the answer?
I don't know. I should have calculated that, but the Crescent is quite a long street. There's probably a couple of hundred houses overall, at least in the Newtown area. And when we've got 10 HMOs, that's 0.5%. No, sorry, 5%. That's my maths were completely wrong then. Yeah. So is that to such an extent that we could justify applying an Article 4 direction? I would probably think not.
I think more appropriate to feed into the local plan, though, that's being discussed at the moment, because it's not just an ELAC issue, it's a borough issue, and there's actually certain places where it's probably not suitable and certain places where it is going to be suitable. So I would urge everyone that at the moment the council are consulting on the local plan, and I do think that this is a serious issue that should probably be fed into that process, because 6 or 7, actually, it's not going to make a huge difference. But actually, a 3-bedroom house into a 6-person HMO is probably a bigger change to the environment than just adding 1 onto a 6. Councillor Irish, yeah.
We had a policy which I got brought in many years ago to stop mid-terraces being converted into flats. Now, apparently, flats and HMOs. Now, apparently, that did not get into the local plan for some reason, and I do believe now it's being reconsidered to go into the local plan. That's my understanding. Is that not correct?
You are correct. There used to be a policy 84H or something like that from memory. That's sad, isn't it? I've been here too long. Yes, it essentially meant you couldn't convert mid-terrace properties and properties under a certain size into flats, because flats was the issue at that time rather than HMOs. HMOs is a more recent issue. No, the similar policy wasn't brought through to the current local plan. As Councillor Bourne has said, it is being looked at as to whether it could go in a revised local plan, but that could still be some way off yet. So my planning policy colleagues are looking at that. They're also looking at, as part of updating the local plan, we're also updating all the suite of supplementary documentation that goes with that. And there may well be scope to add elements within that in terms of parking provisions for HMOs or minimum garden sizes for HMOs, things like that, which not the same as a blanket ban, but will sort of have better control, or allow us to have better control on the size of HMOs and the number of residents within a dwelling. So that's just been investigated at the moment. There's no guarantee that it will happen, but that's something for down the line. It's not something for this evening, really. It's probably a debate for another day in another meeting. Yes.
So guys just informed me that actually there is a local plan consultation event in Eastleigh House on the Monday the 20th of January from 3 p.m. to 8 p.m. So it's like a drop-in event where your views can be heard if you don't want to write in, etc. So I would urge people to go to that. Right, is there any more questions before we move on? No. So could I have a proposer, please? Councillor Park, and a seconder, Cllr Reynolds. And now we move on to the debate. Any debate? Cllr Irish.
Chair, I think it's pretty well known that over the years I've been on this council that I've not been a great supporter of HMOs. I think it's a shame really, because Eastleigh's got lovely family houses and we seem to be putting HMOs, and it's not just in Newtown, it's all over the centre of Eastleigh, and it doesn't really have that sort of add to the character. In fact, it spoils the character of a residential area. And to me, you know, I've always been very, very sceptical about that. It does spoil the character. This one in George Street is typical of that. It does spoil the character of the area, and it's you know, really something we shouldn't be supporting. So I really feel that you know, I can't support it. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Park.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take the opposite view. I spent a lot of my 20s and my 30s living in, they weren't called HMOs there, they didn't have fire regs and all those kind of things. They were shared houses. I was a young professional, I was going out to work, and I wanted to live in the area and I couldn't afford my own home, so a shared house was the option for me. Quite often you'll have people in Eastleigh, they want to move out of their parents' home and break free and have their own place. They might work locally. Where are they going to go? They can't afford to buy a place or rent a whole flat, so they'll go to a HMO or a shared house. So this is a good step out of that, and to still stay within your local area, do a job where you're cycling to work or getting the train. So I don't necessarily see them as all bad. By the sounds of it, these done at a good quality, and with this particular planning application, it's a difference between going from 6 to 7. And I take Gary's point that it's really hard to see that there's any way that we can prove that there's a negative effect from going from those 6 to 7. I would much rather see developers like this who are putting the efforts to do quality HMOs than have somebody who's just putting the 6 in there with no, or even 4, because then 4 you don't have to put all the fire regs and things like that in. So you buy it up, you don't do it up, you just squeeze 4 people in there and charge them a rent without all the sort of extra fire regs and stuff. So at least this is being done in a responsible way. So I can't see any way or reason to go with a refusal to decision for me. So that's.
Councillor Reynolds.
Councillor Park has said. I also think, I mean, young people can't afford houses. They do need somewhere to live. Everybody needs somewhere to live, whether it's families, whether it's single people. We have to think of homes for people. I can't see how it's impacting the area. It's easy. I understand concerns about antisocial behaviour, but, you know, sometimes families are the neighbours from hell. Sometimes HMOs are the neighbours from hell. We just don't know what the situation will be until it happens. We can't evidence that they're going to be appalling residents. We can't evidence that parking is going to be worse. I don't actually think it will be, because I think socially we've got good railway links, we've got good bus, we've got cycles, they're going to have cycling provision. There's also the barrel bikes around Eastleigh, which they can use if they wish, they can walk. It's in a wonderful position for young people to actually live and work. Economically, I think they actually boost the local economy. If you're bringing in more people, 7 instead of a family of 4, you're bringing in, you know, you're encouraging jobs, they're boosting the local economy, the shops, the nightlife, perhaps, you know, everything they spend, just like students do. So I think there is an economic boost. There's a social boost because you're providing homes for people. And environmentally, I think if they're not driving cars, we're working towards a greener, healthier Eastleigh, and surely that is what we're doing by promoting another HMO. And I don't think 8 HMOs in an area, I think you said 200 houses, you know, that is not a great number. And we have to appreciate that anybody that lives in a town centre or near a town, you do get HMOs, you do get more flats, you get a bigger population, and that's the reason why more flats are built. So anyway, I think I've said enough, so thank you.
Councillor Spencer.
So I think there's kind of two parallel discussions here. Number one, HMOs. I don't think it's ideal that we have HMOs in Newtown. It's the kind of area where it would be ideal if families could live there. The character of the area is suited to that. But we have a housing crisis. HMOs are a valuable unit of housing, as Cllr Park said very well. You know, lots of young people of my generation need places like that to live. It's not a want, it's a need. I'd love to buy a house, but I can't buy a house. I would love to buy one of those houses in Newtown, but it's just not attainable for many years. That's why HMOs exist. It's a symptom of a much wider crisis, and I think we have to treat that as such. In terms of planning, I can't see any reason why there would be a considerable difference between a 6-bed dwelling and a 7-bed dwelling. In planning terms, it's quite cut and dry. I'm actually relatively happy with the parking situation. More widely in George Street and Newtown, it's terrible. You know, Wayne can attest to that. We know how bad it is, but one planning application will not change that. You know, in a strange way, because young people can't afford their own houses, those people living in a HMO also probably can't afford a car, and they'll be using public transport anyway. So I think in raw planning terms, I would have to approve this, although I do absolutely hear your concerns about HMOs in the area. It's a growing problem that needs to be fixed at a national level, but that's not our job here tonight, unfortunately.
Councillor Beer.
I personally think this is quite a narrow planning application request, just because obviously we aren't dealing with parking, we aren't dealing with HMOs, we aren't dealing with anything of that. We are just dealing with 6 to 7 makes a material difference. From hearing everyone's opinions, it looks like we have one parking permit already used, we have one parking permit left. It sounds like Hampshire County Council isn't going to be issuing any more. I think there is an issue with, as the report says, the perceived lack of enforcement by local highway authorities. Unfortunately, that's nothing that we can alter at this point. It sounds like the developers have done everything they reasonably can to make sure that the people they're getting a good quality of person in there. But this isn't anything to do with that planning application. And as Gary spelled out really clearly, there is no material difference between 6 or 7. And it's a narrow application. And I don't see any cause why this wouldn't go through at this point. But yeah, just to share my thoughts on it. But it's echoing what a lot of the other members have said tonight.
Oh, Councillor Reynolds, yeah.
Yeah, can I just sort of pick up on Councillor Spencer's point about young people not affording properties? Absolutely right. There is a crisis, a housing crisis, but it's not just young people. It's people in their 40s as well, early 40s. My son's lived in an HMO for 20-odd years, not in Eastleigh, in other places. But without that, he would be homeless. He'd be on the streets, as many people are. So, you know, it is a housing crisis, and it's not just young people, it's midlife as well. Excuse me.
Councillor Park.
One thing I forgot to mention is I'm also the Hampshire County Council councillor for that area. If you have concerns about parking, please contact me. I'll be happy to talk to the parking there. I will be emailing them and getting a commitment that they won't issue more than the 2 that they said they will. But if there are issues, if you'd like them to look at enforcing it more or enforcing it on the Sundays and bank holidays, then I'm very happy to contact the parking enforcement and put that view across for you as your representative.
Councillor Irish.
Thank you, Chair. We may only have 9 or 10 HMOs in Newtown at the moment, but if we carry on doing this, we're going to have probably more HMOs and we're going to have family homes. And I think you've got to come to the point when you've got to draw this line. You know, how much more do we allow? Because it really is affecting the residents and affecting the character of the area. So, you know, it's okay. So, okay, one more HMO now, but it's only 10. next week it could be more and more and more.
I think you misunderstand. This is already a HMO.
Yeah, I
So
know.
whatever we say today will mean that it's still there. You can't.
But the fact it's been enlarged to 7 is probably problematic as well. So, you know, I think we've just got to realise this, that we really have got to take a stand on these things, Chair.
Councillor Beer.
Frankly, I was just going to echo your point, Chair, of this isn't about HMOs, whether we should or shouldn't have them, or how many we should have, or what percentage of our housing should be HMOs. It is just on the 6 to 7, and that's why I originally said I think this is quite a narrow point we are looking at, and unless anyone can raise why there is a difference between having 6 or 7 people in a house, that is the point there that I think I'm struggling to find any major fault with it.
Yeah, if we can make sure that the next person doesn't have an articulated lorry and gets the permit, you know, I understand that would cause a huge issue. So, yeah, had we been sat here today deciding whether we would allow a 4, 5, 6 bedroom HMO, I think that's a different question, because actually the idea of them in that area, so, you know, it's a family area, is out of character. But unfortunately, whatever we decide, a six person HMO is there anyway. And so actually, does the 7th person make a big difference in planning terms that would not get overturned by a planning inspector if we sat here and said no, which is really, really difficult. And I do feel for the residents, because I don't feel that it's the right area for HMOs. They're 3 bedroom family houses, and going from 3 to 7, just, it seems incredible. But unfortunately, we're not the government setting policy today on HMOs. You know, maybe we should be, but we're not. We're here to decide whether we can add an extra bedroom, which I think is probably already in place anyway, but without the person in it. Okie doke. So is there any more debate? Councillor Reynolds.
I'd just like to know why people think it's out of character, because the front of the house, as I understand it, is exactly in keeping with the other properties along the road.
There'll be so many more bins, there'll be so many people coming and going.
They're at the back. It's right at the back of the property.
That's still that's still part of the area. When you're walking down the road, you have to...
I think that is outweighed by the economic, social and environmental benefits to bringing more people in to the town centre.
And understand, I'm just giving some balance on the area and, you know, the character of the area. You know, it's a 3-bed terraced house character area, which is changing. Anyway, so we are going to go to the vote. So all those in favour? And those against? Thank you. Sorry? All right, I don't know what... So the next item is item 8, planning application for 57 Chadwick Road.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. This application is for a single-storey row extension at 57 Chadwick Road in Eastleigh. Location plan and aerial view. The location plan is shown on the left and aerial view of the site on the right. You can see the house has a large driveway and faces towards Chadwick Road. Property photos. These photos show the application application site. In the first photograph, you can see the front of the property being set back from the roadside and having a large driveway. In the next photograph along, you can see the rear of the dwelling. The third photograph shows the rear of the dwelling facing towards a neighbouring property, showing their extension. Site and floor plan. These images show the site plan and proposed floor plans. The area circled in green shows the proposed extension, shaded in grey, in relation to the rear of the neighbouring property. As you can see, the extension would exceed the neighbouring property's rear elevation marginally by approximately 1.5 metres, which would be unlikely to cause significant overshadowing. Front and side elevations. The above slide shows the existing and proposed front and side elevations. The front elevation shows the timber lean-to is to be removed. The side elevations show the extent of the proposed extension in relation to the neighbouring property and its extension. Rear elevations. As you can see, the extension is similar in height and design to the neighbouring property's extension, and therefore in keeping with the area. As the proposed extension is to the rear, there are unlikely to be clear views of it from the street scene. Considerations and key points. In conclusion, the proposed development would be in keeping with the character and pattern of development within the locality. Therefore, my recommendation would be to permit the application subject to conditions set out in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Now open for any questions. Councillor Beer.
This is a very small point. In the notes to applicants, it says it's recommended that a backed or swift box be added. Is there a chance we could change that to required? I'm happy the or stays in there.
If there is a requirement to meet biodiversity net gain, but being a householder application, it's exempt from that. So all the best we could really do is that advice or encouragement rather than make it mandatory.
Could I have a proposer, please? Cllr Park, and a seconder. Councillor Beer. Any debate? I think this one's quite simple. It's just come to us because a neighbour is an EBC member of staff, so it would normally have been delegated, it would have gone through. The key to me is there's no objections and the recommendation is permit, so all those in favour? Thank you, councillors. We now move on to section 9, the public art vision for Eastleigh Town Centre. So we'd like to ask Keely to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. It's public vision for ELAC. Report was given. If there are any questions.
Any questions, councillors? Could I have a proposer? Cllr Park, and a seconder. Councillor Beer. Any debate? Councillor Spencer.
Just thought I'd quickly say that it's a really good piece of work and it's absolutely a good vision for what the town should be doing. Some of the upcoming schemes seem quite exciting as well. It's good that this process is finally getting underway and we've got a policy document in place.
Councillor Park.
But for Cameron's hand going up before mine, he's basically said exactly what I was going to say, so I'll just say ditto.
I think it's a great blueprint, and it'd be good to see more of this. And I'm sure that this will be taken into consideration in the Hemingway project as well, because I think that is really going to focus on brightening up Eastleigh Town Centre. So if this can provide part of the framework towards that, I think that's all good and well. If there's no more debate, all those in favour? Thank you, councillors. So I would now ask you to note the planning appeals that are in the report. And the next meeting will be held on Tuesday, the 21st of January, 7 p.m. at the Point. Thank you and good evening.